Good afternoon, welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, we have organized 2 lectures on medieval India, but medieval India spans for thousands years. We will not cover the entire period. We will focus our lecture only up to Delhi Sultanate, that is between 7th to 13th century. We will start with a debate that all know debate on feudalism and dark ages. We will discuss firstly on these 2 issues, and then we will also talk about the economy, society and other political things like Balban theory of kingship and assessment of endorsement. That is very important part of the Delhi Sultanate. So, we will in 2 lectures we will cover all these aspects, and for discussion on this very topic we have in the studio Dr. Tripti Dev. She teaches history at Hindu College in Delhi University. So, on your behalf I welcome her for the EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Amrinder. Good afternoon, viewers. Today I will be taking up a lecture on some aspects of Delhi Sultanate, not all, and especially the early medieval part of history, which is the 7th to the 12th century and also the 13th century. So, between today and tomorrow I will try and cover important issues that are related to the Delhi Sultanate period. Tomorrow I will be taking up Khaljis and Tughlaqs and the society, economy and culture of the Delhi Sultanates. So, today if we go through the some of the themes that I will be taking up, the early medieval period in the 750 to 1200. Now, there are some important themes that I will touch under this heading, the early medieval period, and these are some of the pertinent issues in my first slide. Major political developments in northern India, peninsula and rise of Rajputs, land grants which were the basis of relations between the king and the politics, Indian feudalism debate, agrarian economy and urban settlements, trade and commerce, society which was in which the status of Brahmins had a different role to play, and the new social order that began, the new learning and educational institutions, the literary traditions, the role of temples, especially in the case of Cholas and other monuments, and the new religious developments that were growing at this point of time, and the philosophical traditions that were growing at this point of time in the early medieval period. Now, to just discuss one of the very important aspect, which is the various theories on feudalism debate. So, my next slide which talks about the 3 important aspects of the debate. First is the polity based on feudal system and feudal mode of production by R.S. Sharma, the theory of integrated polity by B.D. Chattopadhyay, and the theory of segmentary state by Burton-Steen and Champakalakshmi. Now, there have been great historical debates on the period between the decline of the last great empire of northern India and the death of Harshvardhan 648 AD and the beginning of the Delhi Sultanate, which is 1206 AD, which is often designated by historians as the early medieval period in Indian history. Now, most of the historians who focus on the imperial status or the high degree of centralization of the state treat this period as a period of continuous failure. Now, historians like D.D. Kasambi and R.S. Sharma have used the nomenclature of dominance of Indian feudalism in northern India, and that is their major contestation and their major debate of that there was feudalism in the Indian subcontinent during this time in the post-Gupta period. They discuss the post-Gupta period as represented with dark age, as which is distinct from the earlier golden age, which is often known to be associated with the Gupta period in history. Some other historians like B.D. Chattopadhyay discusses this period from a very different perspective, seeing this period as a period of integrating different polities, and so much so especially which he highlights the case of Rajput and their political formation. Another strand discusses South Indian polities in a different sense, and Burton-Steen and Champakalakshmi are theorists who theorizes this. South Indian polities as a society based on cooperative relationship between Varnas, that is Brahmins and Shudras, According to them, these societies were divided into different segments and village assemblies like the sabhas and the mahasabhas, which were important in state building. So, these are some of the briefly some of the different theories around the feudalism debate. Now, let me take them one by one. In my next slide, which is the feudal model, which is the debate actually given by R.S. Sharma, discusses few features of the feudalism debate, why he says that why it is feudalism in the Indian subcontinent and during the early medieval period. He says some of the features that he covers in his pioneering work, Indian Feudalism, is administrative structure based on control and possession of land. Second is decentralized power in the slide, and fragmentation of political authority is the third pointer. Fourth is hierarchy of landed intermediaries, creation of sub-infeudation, dependence of peasants on landowners, subjection and immobility of peasants, disappearance of towns, decline of trade and commerce, relative disappearance of coins or restricted use of metal money. Now, the relative use of coins or restricted use of money is because Cholas were issuing gold coins simultaneously in this period of early medieval period, and in the preceding period of Gupta age, Guptas issued the largest number of gold coins. So, therefore, we see that in all the features of society at this point of time, the feudalism debate protagonists like R.S. Sharma talks about different features which were related to decentralization of power, and then rise of decline of towns and less money in the economy, and this, he suggested, was the reason for this dark age at this point of time. Now, segmentary state model, which is the next discussion of the next theories, the next set of theory that is theorized by Bertenstein and Champakalakshmi. Now, the theory of segmentary state model particularly applies in the context of South Indian polity, and according to this theory, the origin of state in South is attributed to a society which was based on cooperative relationship between Brahmins and Shudras. Now, and this is because unlike in North India, there was an absence of regular varnas of Kshatriya, which were the warrior class, and the Vaishyas, which were the merchant class. The theory further argues that in the segmentary state, there are two types of sovereign power that existed, that is the ritual suzerainty and the political sovereignty. However, due to its overemphasis on a mere caste classification in determining the nature of polity, it did not find wider acceptance, particularly when it came down to be applied by, on the Cholas during the 10th and the 11th centuries. The source of revenue for the state, according to Bertenstein, was from agrarian and partly from trade and commerce, and also partly from the royal control of land routes, which imported horses in India. So, village assemblies, the last pointer in my last slide, in the village assemblies, the sabhas and the samitis played an important role, and temples were also important in state building. So, these were the features of segmentary state model theorized by Bertenstein and Champakalakshmi. This is another aspect of feudalism debate, who did consider the early medieval part of history not feudal, rather not a dark age, but sees in a different context. The third important aspect, the third important debate is the integrative model, which is theorized by B.D. Chattopadhyay. Now, integrated approach put forward decentralizing tendencies of feudal system. That was another way of early medieval period, in which early medieval period was characterized. According to this theory, the formation of states in the post-Gupta period was itself a different process from the earlier ones, and therefore created a different economic and social fabric, social conditions. Rather than seeing the decentralization of power as the main element, as in the case of feudal system, it argued that this period witnessed a different set of state formation, which was based on local sources of power and different emerging centers of authority in their own way. And especially it is particularly applied to the rise of Rajputs in the northwest frontier, and how the Rajput state formation was dependent on the clan relationships, on the bhai-band relationships, and that emerged an important center of power and authority. So this debate again puts itself away from the feudalism debate. So these are three important strands which discusses the feudalism debate, which is the feudal model by R. S. Sharma. Second is the segmentary state model by Burtonstein and Champakalakshmi, and the third is the integrative model, more so to do with the Rajput state formation, given by P. D. Chattopadhyay. Now, moving forward from the debate on feudalism, which is an important aspect of early medieval period, let me discuss the society in the early medieval period. Now, the society in the early medieval period discusses features. First is the proliferation of an incorporation of new castes, and Brahmins playing an important role in legitimizing the authority. Incorporation, this is all given in this slide, which talks about how, with regards to important features like incorporation of new caste and proliferation of new castes, Brahmins playing a major role in legitimizing authority, and Brahmins trace the descent of Rajputs to the solar or the lunar race, and according to them, they gave them new Kshatriya status. Similarly, the Shudras, who were generally treated as outcasts in the post-Gupta period, were brought into a fold of Hinduism by branding them as agricultural landless laborers. So the new social trend witnessed emergence of new jatis and also reshuffling of the old castes. There was also practice of giving gifts of land to appease Brahmins. We also saw incorporation of new cults. So therefore, the society of this period, the early medieval period, does not seem to be so much of dark age. Rather, it sees of it actually witnesses features like incorporation of new cults, incorporation of new social elements in the social order, which was traditionally only fourfold, but now encompasses a broader framework, a broader category. The economy in the early medieval period also saw significant participation of Indians in the Asian trade, an active role in the Indian Ocean, and participation over land to a more distant markets than in the past that was seen. This fact is also evident only in the commercial activities, not only in the commercial activities of Arab conquerors of Sindh, but also in the commercial activities of the Pala rulers of East India, in Tibet and Southeast Asia, and Chola rulers of South. Besides this, we also see Chinese and Central and West Asian connection in trade and exchange, and especially when we see the conflict involving Palas, Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas for the control of Kannauj, we see many evidences of trade and exchange in the economy between the rulers of the Indian subcontinent and the rulers of China, and besides this, the Central and the West Asian rulers. So this was about the economy. Now going on to the culture and the learning, the cultural and the learning aspect, there were new centers of learning that emerged in many places like Nalanda and Vikramshila in eastern India, Vallabhi in western India, Kannauj and Varanasi in northern India, Kanchipuram in south India, and they displayed signs of progression in the field of education and learning. In fact, some of them, particularly Nalanda, became one of the greatest institutions known in then world. Apabrahmasha, which was actually a result of this period, also is believed to be the ancestor of modern languages, was also seen to be growing at this point of time. So vis-a-vis the culture and learning, in fact, the origin of Bhakti and the Sufi movement from south also was an important phenomena that we see during this time in vis-a-vis the religious and the religion aspect. Taking further a little more explanation on the religion in the early medieval period, we see that there were different religious sects that developed, sects and cults that dominated the lives of rural and urban people at a popular level, are also rooted in the development of religious practices during this period. We see this in the development of new religious cults like Tantricism, Vaishnavism, Shaivism and Shaktism. Now, at a higher level, the teaching of Vedanta also reached its climax in the philosophical ideas of Shankaracharya based on his theory of Advaitvad, which is non-dualism. By providing an ideological basis to the notion of unity and diversity or higher pantheism and the multiplicity of practices and beliefs at the lower level, Shankaracharya made a notable contribution to the growth of a largely monotheistic religion of Hinduism in modern times. We also see growth of Sufism and Bhakti during this time, and then onwards in the entire medieval period, through and through to the Mughal period, there was growth of these sects of the religious sects of the Bhakti and the Sufis. Now, this covers till now what I have covered is the early part of the medieval Hindu history, the Delhi Sultanate period, which encompassed the debate, the three aspects of debate, the feudal model, the integrative and the segmentary model, also the society, economy, the culture, learning and the religious, the spiritual aspect of briefly what are the important issues that I have taken right now in the few minutes which have passed. Now, the next aspect that I will take up today is the 13th century. Now, there were many issues that were pertinent in the 13th century, which becomes an important point for us to discuss and debate, and also important questions and important developments are related to the Sultanate rulers, especially the Iltutmish, Balban and his theory of kingship. So, few important themes that I will take up in this particular lecture is the Ghurian invasion, the success of the Ghurids, the reasons for the defeat of Rajputs, early Sultanate rulers, their chronology, the role of Iltutmish and his assessment, Balban and the Barnese theory of kingship. So, these are some of the themes that I will take up now discussing the 13th century of the medieval period. Now, after a detailed discussion on different aspects of early medieval period, the important aspect from the 8th to the 8th to the 12th century, let me highlight to you the important developments when India was being attacked and conquered by Ghazni and Ghurid. So, the period from 990 to 91 to 1015 was a protracted struggle wherein gradually Afghanistan, Punjab and Multan were lost to Ghaznavites. The way was now open for Turkish advance into the Gangetic plains. 1163 we see Ghiyasuddin Muhammad assume the throne of Ghur. The first battle of Tarain, which is 1191, where Prithviraj Chauhan won against Muhammad Ghor, and in the second battle of Tarain, where Prithviraj Chauhan lost in 1192 to Muhammad Ghori. Now, the important thing to focus here is that rather than just giving you a simple political chronology, a simple narrative of Muhammad of Ghazni, who ascended the throne of Ghazni in 999, it is important and fascinating to treat this period historiographically. Now, there is no need on one hand to treat Muhammad of Ghazni, Muhammad Ghazni's India campaign as completely a campaign of plundering and loot. Historians like Mill and R.C. Majumdar have interpreted these events as plundery iconistic raids in harmony with the character of Muslim protagonist. Alternatively, Marxist historiographer like Muhammad Habib in his work gives a scientific objectivist reading that underlines the economic rationale behind temple looting. Furthermore, John F. Richards talk about this period from the 7th to the 13th century as a period of slow moving frontiers. So, he has another way of talking about how the frontier of the medieval period at this point of time were constantly moving because of the plundering and raids. So, his interpretation of the attack of Muhammad of Ghazni and Ghor is quite different to what Mill and Majumdar have discussed vis-a-vis plundering and loot. Now, after we understand Ghazni and Ghur and their attacks on and Ghur winning finally in Muhammad Ghori winning finally in 1192, we see that there was a beginning the rise of the Turkish invasion, the Turks. Now, some important themes that are important for us to understand when we discuss rise of Turks in this slide, I have given 3 important points of 3 important debates that are around rise of Turks. First is that there was no Muslim invasion. The term that is more applicable to be used is Turkish invasion. And the second is the Indian and the foreign debate. So, whether it was the Indian who were there, or it was these Turks who came were foreigners. So, the Indian and the foreign debate becomes important. Now, the sources to study this period is more of textual and literary sources, and very less inscriptional evidences like coins and all are available, and we see that with the study of numismatics, coins and inscriptions is more when we study the ancient period of history. But in this period, the focus is more on the literature, the literary trends, and the reconstruction of history becomes possible through these literatures. Now, Turks were the most rustic and nomadic plunderers. They were employed as soldiers for the Islamic world, and substantial number were good foot soldiers in the Arab world. They grew rapidly in the ranks of army and were valued for their ability and loyalty. Slowly, they also became a part of the administration, and known as slaves of free masters, they had to get freedom to claim the throne. So, all the slaves had to first be manumitted, they had to be freed to actually become the rulers and be called as the rulers of the empire. We will go on to see that how later Iltutmish also had to, who was a slave to Kutubuddin Aibak, also had to draw investiture from the Caliphate of Baghdad to actually claim himself the ruler. So, he was first manumitted, he was first freed, and then he was made he was accepted as the ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. Now, while we are discussing the rise of Turks, let me also enlist the reasons for the defeat of Rajputs. By and large, the reasons for the defeat of Rajput lies in the most constant political disunity in northern India. There were many centers of power, many Rajput lineages like Chauhans, the Tamaras, and many centers of political power. By and large, power was in the hands of many Rajput chieftains who were constantly bickering and fighting amongst each other. Now, the second reason that is attributed is to the military reason. The equipments, technology, strategies of warfare, notions and rules of warfare were much better with the Turks than as compared to the Rajputs themselves. Now, for example, the iron equipments and fine horses available to the Turks were better. Also, the practice of horseshoe, the reins that were used were while riding the horse was made of leather, and art of archery while horse riding was efficiently done by practiced by the Turks than the Rajputs, and this gave them a little edge over the Rajputs, and this caused the defeat of one of the reasons for the defeat of the Rajputs is seen as the military reason. Next important reason that we see is the society and culture. The society and culture of India by and large was caste ridden, and this weakened the army. There was no sense of patriotism, and the notions of karma and fate were most overwhelming in the minds of the soldiers. So, they were less determined to fight back after they lost, as they thought that it is their fate, and going back to the field would not be right, because it's their fate to lose. So, going back and fighting was not the spirit, rather to accept what is in their karma and fate, which were actually the nature in which the society was functioning was one of the main reasons for the defeat of Rajputs. Now, after the brief introduction to the Delhi Sultanate period with the Ghurian invasion, the different chronology that is important for us to understand, the series of events that became important for the Turks to come into India, the rise of Turks, who were these Turks, and the reasons for the defeat of Rajputs, let me now give you briefly make you understand the political chronology of Delhi Sultanate. Kutubuddin Aibak, who ruled from 1206 to 1210, Shamsuddin Iltutmish 1210 to 35, Ruknuddin Firoz from 1235 to 36, Razia from 1236 to 40, Behram Shah from 1240 to 42, Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah from 1246 to 66, Balban from 1266 to 87, and 1290, which is the period that I am going to end today, the 13th century, end of the 13th century, is the end of Turks and the beginning of a different tribe called the Khaljis. Now, if you look at this political chronology, you will see that Aybak was the one who came briefly and established the rule of Delhi Sultanate, but it was Iltutmish who really consolidated his rule and in 1210 and became the first Sultan of Delhi Sultanate. He wanted to appoint and he nominated Razia, his daughter, in 1236 to be the next ruler. But however, the way the nobility revolved around Firoz, Ruknuddin Firoz, the son of Iltutmish, made Ruknuddin Firoz the ruler for about a year, and then Razia from 1236. After briefly the quick succession of the rulers Behram Shah and Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, we see the longest rule of Balban. And so basically today I am going to take up two important questions, two important assessments of Iltutmish and Balban a little later. Taking you through the next slide is some of the photographs of the sketches of the early Sultanate rulers, Aybak, Iltutmish, and then Razia Sultan and Balban. Also, let me briefly also make you familiar with the extent of the Delhi Sultanate in the 13th century, 12th and the 13th century, which extends from Ghazni, Kabul, Lahore, Delhi, further to the Doab region and the Indo-Gangetic plain, the Doab region up till the Bengal. So, we do not see it the extension of the territory to Deccan right now, which we will see during the time of Khaljis and Tughlaqs that I will discuss tomorrow. But briefly, till the 13th century, the extent of and the early part of 14th century, the extent of Delhi Sultanate rulers was by and large this. Now, the important question that becomes extremely significant for us to study is the assessment of Iltutmish, the first ruler who actually established, rather re-established the integrity of the Delhi Sultan and the Delhi Sultanate. In fact, the foundation that he created was the main foundation on which the early sultans had built their rule, and then of course Khalji and the Tughlaqs developed on it. So, Iltutmish re-established territorial integrity of Delhi Sultanate. He defeated many of his rivals like Yalduz and Kubacha, who were interested in dividing the Sultanate rule. Also, he was involved in the policy of steady consolidation rather than rapid expansion. We see that he saw when he came to power, he was sure of the fact that he will not be accepted as the Sultan. He was a slave to Qutbuddin Aybak. He did not have, he was of course a Turk, but he did not have a sanction to rule because he was a slave. Of course, he was manumitted, he was freed, but his acceptance among the nobility was not as much as it would be for any other person or any other person from the rulership coming to the throne. So, we see that Iltutmish had many problems when he came to rule. And so, therefore, rather than going for expansion and territorial conquest, he decided to involve himself in the steady consolidation of his rule. He also received investiture, which is seen one of the main development from the Caliphate of Baghdad. And after he received the investiture, he was declared as the Sultan of the Sultan of the Delhi Sultanate, and that was something that gave him sanction to rule and general acceptance that he had among the rulers of the other Muslim world, and also the nobility in the Delhi Sultanate rule. One of the main things that he did was he made Delhi as the political and administrative he made Delhi as a political, administrative and the cultural center of Turkish rule. So, we may wonder that Delhi began to be the center of capital, the capital center from what time. It was really Delhi's prominence beginning to be established from the time of Iltutmish. So, we see Iltutmish making for the first time Delhi as a center of political, administrative and cultural center for Turkish rule. He built the famous Qutub Minar, the Hauz-e-Shamsi and the first madrasa. So, the first madrasa in the Indian subcontinent was actually constructed by Qutbuddin, by Iltutmish, and of course, the task that Qutbuddin Aibak had left was completed. The establishment and the completion of Qutub Minar in the Qutub complex in Delhi was also done by Iltutmish. He was also a man of great learning, and he honored famous Sufi saints like Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki, who was a Suhawardi, belonged to the Suhawardi silsila of Sufism. So, basically, if we see and assess Iltutmish and his importance and significance in the establishment of rule of the Delhi Sultanate, these are some of the important points that you can keep in your mind, which is first that he re-established the territorial integrity of the Delhi Sultanate in the slide that I was explaining. Then the defeat, he actually defeated the efforts of his ambitious rivals Yalduz and Kubacha, who wanted to divide the Sultanate. Also, the next important point about the policy of steady consolidation. So, he was a person of major tact, patience and farsightedness, who displayed his intelligence in consolidation rather than just expansion, reckless expansion. Also, early in his reign, he decided, of course, to steady consolidate, and under him Delhi became a major center of political, economic, cultural, social setup. He for the first time made Delhi Sultanate as an independent state. So, Delhi Sultanate, a sultanate that was not ruled by somebody from Ghazni and Gur, but rather is not ruled by somebody as a foreigner, somebody who doesn't belong to this continent, who is ruling from a foreign country, which was happening before. At the time of Ghazni and Gur, who wanted to establish rule but went back to Ghazni and Gur. So, basically the functioning of the rule of the Turks was happening from Ghazni and Gur for a short time during Ghazni and Gur, but it was Ghori, but it was Iltutmish, who actually under him did not tie up Delhi Sultanate with any foreign sovereign living at Ghazni or Gur, but he himself gave a legal setup to Delhi, and in the eyes of Muslims he was reaffirmed as the Sultan when he got the investiture from the Caliphate of Baghdad. He also made Delhi as an administrative political capital and really invited and welcomed different refugees. He encouraged refugees, nobles, bureaucrats, scholars, poets and religious divines from Central Asia, West Asia, who were actually suffering a lot under Mongol depredation in that part of frontier, and were moving forward to Delhi to come for some work. In fact, the theory of social mobility here becomes important, wherein the establishment of Delhi became really important right now, because there was this fear of Mongols in the western frontier, the northwest frontier, and because of which there were a number of scholars, there were a number of writers, number of bureaucrats who were coming to Delhi for seeking some employment. So, this actually increased the importance of Delhi as a center, as a capital of the Turkish rule. So, if one really sees the fear of Mongols, the Mongols' depredation was a boon to the way Delhi was developing, because it was the way it was receiving so many bureaucrats, it was receiving a number of nobles and scholars and poets, and that led to making Delhi as a very lucrative capital for a number of people. Now, of course, we see a number of monuments that were being established during Iltutmish's time, and however, we see that Iltutmish ruled for a very short period of time. If we see the chronology again, it is from 1210 to 35. Now, from 1210 to 35, because of constant bickering and constant fight of the nobility who wanted to replace one ruler, some part of nobility favored the other set of rulers. So, because of this, Sultanate could not be established as a strong rule. However, it was very difficult for Iltutmish to actually bring about a very close-knit, compact, tight Sultanate. He was not able to really establish and create that kind of well-knit and compact state. The state was still a loose structure in which inner jealousies and rivalries of Turkish nobles, who were literally the kingmakers at this point of time, and slave officers could be kept, were constantly on a stronger footing vis-a-vis the ruler. So, therefore, Delhi Sultanate really needed somebody as a strong ruler who could centralize authority, a strong ruler who could really bring Sultanate into a solid form, in a more compact, in a more centralized nature. And that was done not by anybody else, but after Razia tried for a bit, but Razia Sultan, but it was basically Balban, who is known for centralizing Delhi Sultanate, the rule of Delhi Sultanate for the first time. So, my next few minutes that I will take up in my lecture will be on the assessment of Balban as a ruler and his theory of kingship. Now, Balban's theory of kingship is actually crafted by Barni, who was the court historian, and Barni, of course, most of us know of his importance as a historian, as a court historian in the court of many rulers of Delhi Sultans. Now, Balban ascended the throne in 1266, and the way he ascended the throne, initially he was the Nayab of the Delhi Sultan before Balban, and how in a very old age actually he became the ruler. His mind was of a lot of suspicion. He wanted that his rule, that once he is in power, the power should be within his family. So, he really wanted his family members to be a part of the rulership and not and therefore, he was always very suspicious of people around him. He also therefore got attracted to Iranian theory of kingship, which actually made the ruler the most important person in the political setup, and this was because he wanted to strengthen his own position. He wanted to strengthen the position of the ruler. Now, Balban ascended the throne of Delhi in 1266, and he broke the era of a strong, he actually began the era of a strong centralized rule, strong centralized government. He broke the power of the Turkish Chahalgani. Chahalgani is a group of 40. This was a group of 40 nobles which were prominent till about at the time of Qutbuddin Aibak, Iltutmish, Ruknuddin Firoz Shah, Razia. So, before Balban, this group of 40 nobles were the most important element in the court, the Delhi Sultanate court. So, Balban actually broke the power of this Turkish Chahalgani, the group of 40, and he sought to therefore increase his own prestige and power of monarchy, and he centralized rule under his own authority, in his own hands, under the Sultan, because he was convinced that the only way to face the internal and external dangers facing him is by strengthening the rule of the ruler, strengthening the authority of the ruler. He should be unquestionable. That's the authority that actually Iltutmish wanted to, Balban wanted to create. So, therefore, he harked upon the Iranian theory of kingship, where king was divine or semi-divine in character and answerable only to God, not to any set of intermediaries like the religious figures or the religious ulemas. Rather, the fundamental difference between the ruler and the noble, according to him, is that the noble, the latter, is dependent on the ruler, and therefore there is this element of subordination that should be accepted by the noble vis-a-vis his relation with the ruler. Therefore, we see that broadly there was this consolidation of the rule, the consolidation of the rule of the king. The Sultan, according to Iranian theory of kingship, is treated as the shadow of God on earth, the Zil-e-Ilahi. Now, the Zil-e-Ilahi is of course a Persian term which means the shadow of God on earth, and everyone in his court, everyone in the court of Balban had to perform sijda and paibos. So, sijda is actually bowing and paibos is actually touching the feet of the ruler in the court. Balban wanted to maintain a splendid court, and he himself maintained the utmost dignity in the court. So, the way his demeanor was, the way he behaved in the court, he did not laugh aloud, neither did he allow anybody else to laugh aloud. There were no casual talks, there was a sense of strictness and formality that Balban involved in. And this was because he wanted to maintain certain code of conduct which was, as per the Iranian theory of kingship, focusing on the ruler. The next important aspect that I would like to cover under Balban's theory of kingship is the fact that Barani was the main person who actually crafted his theory of kingship. And according to him, Barani in many of his writings quotes that it was Hindus and Muslims who actually walked from for about 100 to 200 kos to actually see Balban's public procession. So therefore, we see from the sources that how Balban and the way he conducted was so royal, was so firm, was so strict. It was so much in tandem with the Iranian theory of kingship, which was revered upon, that he became the most important ruler. The entire authority was around him. Therefore, he made a systematic effort to reorganize the system of administration, particularly at the local and the provincial level. So, apart from the court, he also maintained local and provincial level authority. The local and provincial level authority he tried to strengthen. He also tightened the control of the officials by maintaining barids, or the news reporters, who actually informed him of developments, especially which were to do with the revenue collection. And revenue collection done by the Iqtidars. I am going to take the Iqtidari system tomorrow in detail, but how revenue collection was important, and revenue collection for the state was important, and Balban focused on that. He, however, did not undertake any large scale building.
Sorry, I would like to interrupt you. We have a question from STM College Ujre. Yeah, good afternoon. Please ask your question.
Yes. So, Hindu polity, in Hindu polity, there is a belief that Raja Pratyaksha Devata. So, did this idea have any influence on the divine right theory of kingship of Delhi Sultans?
His question is there is a Raja Pratyaksha Devata, Raja Devta के समान होता है. Yeah, तो was it influence to the Delhi Sultanate ruler or not? Did this philosophy influence them? That's why they Balban used the kingship theory like that.
Actually, it's a very interesting question. From the sources that is revealed, it is revealed that Iranian theory of kingship was something that the rulers of Delhi Sultanate like Balban wanted to emulate. So I don't know how much is I'm not aware of the fact that how much was he aware of, or he was aware of the Hindu side of story, Hindu sides of belief, where king is treated as is unquestionable. It was more of the Iranian theory of kingship, that which again treated the ruler as the center as more important. So, according to the sources, the literary sources that we get, like for example Barani, they have quoted more of Iranian theory of kingship and the influence of Iranian theory of kingship on Balban's theory of kingship and his ideas of maintaining a strong center than so much to do with the Hindu idea of kingship, basically.
It is a matter of research.
It's a matter of research, and it is also a matter of it is a matter of coincidence, or it's not a matter of coincidence also, but it is the fact that Hindu belief in the king as the most important is also there, but from where Balban drew was Iranian theory of kingship. That I am.
But the Balban born and brought up in India, when we compare with the other rulers, because maybe the influence of Hindu deity and the kings more in comparison to others, Delhi Sultanate rulers, those who inspired from the Iranian kings.
Yeah, it may be. I'm sure that it may be that he must be influenced from the Hindu theory, but we do not see him in interaction with too many ideals, which would or people who would elements who would actually influence him on this aspect. I think it was more to do with the Iranian theory of kingship that he was influenced. Because the aspect of shadow of God on earth, Zilay-Allah, is something that is re-emphasized by Barani when he talks about Balban. And this, for the fact, comes from the Iranian theory of kingship. For that matter, when we study the Mughal period also, you know, Akbar is also considered as, he also draws a lot from Iranian theory of kingship when Abul Fazl builds his theory of kingship. So there also we see the inclination of more taking it from Iranian theory of kingship, because in the Muslim world that was something that has to be emulated. That was the best form of kingship.
Okay. So now you continue with your talk.
So I was focusing on the Balban's theory of kingship and the fact that how he was able to maintain his authority in so much power that he was able to consolidate the rule centralize the rule in his own hands during his period. Now, also if we study and if we look into the local and the provincial aspect, at the local and provincial levels, Balban tried to strengthen the land revenue system. He tried to strengthen the system of revenue collection. He, however, did not undertake any large-scale building activity in Delhi or elsewhere. He also did manage to contain Mongols, which was one of his main achievements, at the Multan, Dipalpur and the Sanam line along the river Bias. So Balban, again, to just recap, was not interested so much on expansion. He realized that that point of time that he has come to rule, at that point of time, the most important thing for him was consolidation. So he did not unnecessarily went into expeditions. He also made sure that he was, through his theory of kingship, centralizing authority, which the other rulers somehow were not able to kind of develop in the Delhi Sultanate period. Therefore, Balban is also attributed to as a ruler who actually for the first time centralized authority under the Delhi Sultans. Now, these are some of the points that I wanted to take up in today's lecture, and just because we have a little time, let me give you a little summary of what I did. Today I discussed important aspects of feudalism debate, and if we look at the analysis of the debate of feudalism, which is one of the most important study till date during the early medieval period, because there was no centralized rule. Many historiographers, especially the colonial historiographers, think that it was a dark age. Again, if we just focus on the one central rule and it not being there, it would look like a dark age. But if we really focus on other kinds of histories, other developments that were happening during this period, we will see that it was not really a dark age. It was a period of flourishing trade, many regional polities, many successful literatures being written, many spiritual sects that were being formed, and many institutions of learning that developed. Of course, there was decline of certain trade centers, but there was also revival of many old ones and coming up of new ones. So if we analyze the feudal debate, the perspective of colonial historiography in the post-Gupta period they termed this period, the early medieval period from the 7th through the 12th century, as the Dark Age, and the notion became largely demolished in the light of recent researches on the regional history. So when Bertenstein, Champakalakshmi and B.D. Chattopadhyay study the South Indian history or the Rajput history, they see a different picture altogether. Rather than seeing Dark Age as suggested by the colonial historiography, they see this aspect of formation, state formation, political formation, new developments, which were far more greater than just treating this period as a dark age. The idea of dark age was based on the absence of a big empire or the centralized states, and in their place the presence of smaller and unimportant kingdoms, causing political chaos and confusion. The recent interest in regional history also grew out in the debate that whether this period can be constituted as Indian feudalism or not. So there was a debate whether this period can be called as Indian feudalism, or not. The general assumption really discards the theory of dark age, and at least from the 9th century onwards, we see that the Indian subcontinent, far from being dark, had produced symptoms of dynamic changes, of continuity, and that became seminal in actually many later institutional developments, many later institutions, many major developments that were to begin from the 12th century onwards. So basically this part of lecture was most important because there are questions, there are debates. It is one of the most dynamic part of the medieval Indian history, the early medieval period, and also the latter half of my discussion was on assessing first the political chronology of the early Sultanate rulers up to 1290, up to the assessment of Balban, wherein I discussed how Iltutmish had established power under what circumstances, and how later Balban had consolidated his rule around the theory of kingship that he built. So that is it on my lecture today on the Delhi Sultanate.
Okay. So that's fine. As you told, the Balban tried to concentrate the power, centralize the power. What was the things in the case of feudalism, or what made him to do like this?
What made him to do?
Centralize the power in one.
Balban.
Yeah.
Balban actually was not somebody who was new to the atmosphere of the Sultanate rule. He was an official. He was a part of the broader household of the Sultanate rule. So he knew what was the functioning and what were the merits, demerits, the strengths and you know the demerits of how the Sultanate was functioning. And what he realized was that the nobility was really overwhelming the power. The nobility was dominating the power. They were not allowing the rulers to rule. So for him, the two most important thing that he wanted to do was first make ruler the most important, strengthen his rule, so that if the rule of the Sultan becomes important politically, then he can really consolidate his rule geographically. Okay. And secondly, he wanted to retain the rule, as in the rule should be within his family. So for that, he himself had to be in a position of strong. As a strong element. So therefore, he was a part of a broader Delhi Sultanate household, and he realized these things as a part of the Delhi Sultanate.
We have another question. Okay, I think got disconnected. So, okay, but how you see this helped him to establish his authority, or it just felt like other experiment?
No, he was in fact quite, we study him so well, and there are many researches on Balban because of the fact that how he was able to really centralize control. So if we look at, he came to power in 1266, and he actually ruled up till 1290. Okay. So in the span of really 25 years, 22 years, we see that he was able to really maintain and consolidate rule. And in fact, he came to power in 1266, but before that he was a part of the Delhi Sultanate from much before. So in fact, we must give credit to Balban in the way he actually centralized rule.
Okay, and in a way he also gave a kind of large number of provinces that times. Yeah, we can say that feudalism, that same practice was being followed in feudal lords with feudal lords. So it was a challenge. So what was the mechanism he developed for that?
Rather than focusing so much on the feudalism per se, I think the Sultanate rulers, had come up with the Iqtidari system, which was of course a part of the Central Asian system of revenue collection also. It wasn't something which is new or an innovation of the Sultanate rulers, and vis-a-vis the revenue collection and the way they actually handle the provinces, they did it through the Iqtidari system. Okay. So, and Iqtidari system is clearly defines how much revenue to pay, what is the part of the ruler, what is the part of the state, how much to retain, what are the different taxes. So, of course, it was done in the society which was probably feudal according to some historians, but we see that more importantly it was strengthening to get revenue.
Okay.
So, actually tapping and controlling the officials to collect revenue.
Okay. So, and while doing assessment to the Iltutmish, you talked about the various aspects. But how will you compare Balban and Iltutmish in establishing the control over the Sultanate?
In the way Iltutmish came to power, the conditions in which they came to power, the political realities were very different.
Okay.
When Iltutmish came to power, he was a slave, as in he had to actually he had to get investiture from the letter of investiture from the caliphate.
Yeah.
Yes, and the way the nobility was functioning, it was actually predominant in making Iltutmish very weak in establishing power. Of course, he established rule for the first time. He had his own sets of credits in the way he functioned and established rule from 1210 onwards. But by the time Delhi Sultanate rule reached Balban, it became more formal, it became more centralized, and Balban was able to understand the politics of Delhi Sultanate better and create a foundation which was more centralized in nature.
Okay.
So, if we see, the political realities are only very different when we study Iltutmish and Balban.
Okay. So, well friend, I hope today's lecture must have benefited all of you. Tomorrow we will have another lecture on Delhi Sultanate and you can say early medieval India. So, with this we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. Tripti Dev for giving such an insightful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.